Thank you. To begin, Dr. Annie, we would like to know more about your story. How did your interest in becoming an English teacher first begun?
Mm. Okay, so I was fresh out of high school back in the day, and I was trying to decide what I wanted to study for my university studies. So I've always been interested in English and learning English, and I had been at the time enjoying my English classes, and I've been learning English as a secondary school student. And I was also taking English classes at a language center affiliated to my high school, which was part of Universidad de Guanajuato, but a high school in León. And I don't know, um, I remember really enjoying those language center classes more than my regular English classes at secondary school. And my high school, we also had English classes at my high school, but I really noticed it was very different from my language centers classes. And I also knew about the Bachelor in TESOL. I happen to know about that program because the last semester at high school, one of our English teachers retired, and then the new English teacher was so good. And then we were enjoying her classes, and she mentioned that she had studied a bachelor in TESOL, and I didn't even know that was a thing that I could do, or that, it was a possibility to study TESOL, teaching English as a second language. Is that the acronym? Yeah. So I remember I was very inspired by her, and then I was like, right, I will research all I can about this program. And then I think it was basically that. I was also interested in becoming a librarian back then. I don't know, I had that kind of like curiosity. I really enjoyed visiting libraries as a high school student and spend a lot of time in the library. So that was another thing that I was kind of exploring. But I also always enjoyed helping my classmates with their English assignments. And I felt, oh, I can explain these things. Maybe I can study to become an English teacher. So I'm very glad that I ended up choosing the path of English teaching rather than librarianship. I'll now work at a library. We can touch on that a bit later, but I'm very happy that I chose the other path. Yes, so that's my story.
Okay, thanks, Annie, for sharing. And I think it's interesting how, well, we have listened to different stories about people that became English teachers. And most of the time, there is a teacher who inspire
Hmm.
their students
Mm,
in order to become teachers. And we
yeah.
interview, like in the beginning of the season, we interview
Hmm.
a Dr. Nayeli, and we were talking about her research, and that talks about that. That talks
Mm,
about how teachers inspire other new teachers in order to be
hmm.
to start teaching, and I think that's really interesting. Now, at what
Yeah.
moment did you realize that you wanted to continue studying or that you wanted
Hmm.
to pursue a degree, a master's degree?
Yeah. So the I graduated with my bachelor in TESOL in I think 2014, and it was early 2015 when the MA in Applied Linguistics from the University of Guanajuato, it had just been created. And I remember basically I had just 6 months from when I graduated to when I enrolled in the MA, and I thought, what better opportunity than continuing my master degree, being that I just graduated, right? So all of these ideas and all of these things that I learned throughout my bachelor were fresh in my mind, and I was also teaching. So I remember that mid BA program, that's when I started teaching, and it became so many of the things that I was learning in my bachelor clicked because now I had the experience and I had things that could see and experience myself as a beginner English teacher, that all the theory was now making more sense. I had now um, words to describe what I was going through and all of these theories backing up all of the things that I was going through. So I thought, well, I have all of these ideas fresh in my mind. I'm still teaching English, and it was a new program. So I decided, yes, I want to continue with my postgraduate studies. And I also thought it was a very logical next step for me, because I was still very young back then, and I thought, well, I have no other big responsibilities in my life at the moment, so it's a good moment for me to enroll. But I also know that, you know, I had colleagues that had other life priorities and still decided to enroll and then they made it work. So in the end, I think it was the right choice for me personally, but for many of my colleagues as well. I was also early career English teacher in 2015. I had been teaching for like 3 or 4 years back then, and I still wanted to kind of like hone my abilities and yeah, just continue learning. I think it was the right choice. I developed more specialized theoretical knowledge about language learning and teaching. I also learned a bit more about methodologies, not just teaching methodologies, but research methodologies, language and society, using academic language, writing academically, all that kind of thing, but to the next level. From, you know, I could see the difference from my BA and the sorts of challenges that were associated with my master's in a good way, to kind of like help me get to the next level. Writing academically and expressing myself academically in conferences as well. So that's how I knew I wanted to continue. And once enrolled, I enjoyed it very much. And I learned so much about some of the things that I take for granted. Like an example, going to conferences. When we go to conferences, we don't know what goes behind organizing a conference. And I remember we had to, as part of the program, the MA students, we had to organize a conference. And I gained a new, how can I say this? I saw conferences differently because I knew all of the work that goes into putting together a conference. I learned about organizing things like the logistics, reaching out to speakers, budget, funding, you know, facilities, booking the rooms, all of that. And I just took for granted every time I attended a conference, I thought, oh well, these things are easy. But that's just one example. Another example was the academic stays, the estancias académicas in the master program. I went to all of them. I almost all of them. I went to all of the national ones because I never went to one of the international ones. But that also helped me a lot to expand my understanding of what other universities were doing in the area of language learning and teaching and all that kind of thing. So I would do it again 1,000 times. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Annie, to share your experience with us. And following that idea, many students see postgraduate studies as something distant or intimidating. How was the transition from being a master student to becoming a doctoral student? Because I know that is a huge
Mhm.
step.
It is, yes. Um, I won't lie, It was intimidating. I know that you mentioned that people think it's intimidating. For me, it was intimidating, and still every next step that I take in my career has been intimidating. But I think, and especially like you said, Marlene, especially pursuing a PhD can be quite daunting. Um, but I think I now try and look at it as a professional development opportunity because every time you go through that experience, you learn new skills and you develop new abilities. And it is challenging, but I think it is important to welcome those learning opportunities. Of course, as long as it's something that aligns with your goals, with what you want at the time, or if it's something that aligns with your professional projects and ambitions. So, yeah, so the transition wasn't easy and wasn't something necessarily smooth, but I don't think there is a perfect transition. There will always be challenges. For some people, it could be, maybe moving from one degree to a different area. And for other people, might be, having to move to a different city or country could be, that could be the challenging part. But yes, I never knew what to expect from both postgraduate journeys that I have ventured into the MA and the PhD. But what I knew was that I wanted to keep growing and I wanted to expand my experiences. Um, and I wanted to apply the knowledge that I had been acquiring and so I wanted to expand that. Um, so what I definitely knew before enrolling was that it was going to be hard. That's something that we know. Doctoral studies are hard. I just didn't know how hard they were gonna be. They're pretty hard. But I did it, and it's now that I look back, so many times I wanted to quit, so many times I wanted to maybe not, maybe say, "Hey, I don't want to do it anymore. It's so hard." But um, you have to go through it, right? So um, I had to sacrifice several things. Of course, we know that's something that comes with postgraduate studies. You have to adjust your life and sacrifice certain things. Um, People talk about like hobbies. You don't have hobbies. You sometimes friends can also your friends need to understand that you're so busy that you sometimes don't have time for them. Family as well. So those sort of sacrifices I had to make. And I also knew that, Universidad de Guanajuato and University of Auckland are top universities in each country. So I knew that the profiles of the aspirants or the profile of the people that wanted to enroll are high expectations behind those things. So, but yeah, one thing is imagining those things and thinking, oh yeah, I can, work hard and I can, block time in the evening to study or to read, etc. And another very different thing is to actually go through it yourself. And I think you can relate, even though this is a story about the PhD, I'm very sure you can relate as MA students. There's so much you have to sacrifice, there's so many things you need to adjust in your life. So it's something like that, but on steroids. When it's a PhD, it can be quite hard. So, so back to the question, the transition was a like a bumpy ride. Like I didn't really stop, but it was like too many bumps in that trajectory. But I had support from my MA mentors, my peers, of course, family and friends. And that was kind of like the all I needed to get me started and then go on from there. And grow and gain confidence and strength. Um, and then I also, of course, formed new important relationships once I started the PhD, and I had to build a community of other PhD students that were feeling lost like me and confused and, you know, questioning why we do what we do. So it's a thing about having a little bit of initiative as well, wanting to form a community maybe, and always also rely on people that you trust and friends that you know that they will understand what you're going through. So I did rely on my colleagues and to be able to succeed in the end. You hear a lot about PhD being a lonely period, right? It's an isolating experience. And I never really thought too much about that before starting. I knew about what they say about PhD that can be very lonely, journey can be isolating. But once I was going through it myself, and I actually experienced moments where I felt quite alone and isolated. It can be very challenging and demanding because I couldn't help but compare my experience as an MA student versus PhD student. And in the MA, I think I had structure, I had colleagues, I had more, you know, colleagues that become friends and that kind of thing. And you see them every weekend, you have assignments together, you have things together. Sometimes you work with them outside of the master, you teach in the same institution, things like that. So it is a bit easier to form those relationships, but at least in my experience, it was a bit about me having to find those connections with people because everyone is at different stages in their PhD. So there's no, at least here in New Zealand, but I'm not sure, it might be different in other countries. But here you start so you can start anytime, and you go and you do your thing, and you work with your supervisor. But new PhD students can come along, but they have their own thing and they have their own journey, and it's not always easy to form those connections. I did find a community, and I did um build it. Oh, not me, only me, but like with others, and we kind of like found this community, and that was the thing that saved us, honestly, because otherwise you go insane. But it was really good to have that. So in the end, I think what helped that transition was also to create a supportive community and to rely on that community. Yes. Mm.
Thank you so much for your answer, Dr. Annie. And now that you mentioned that you did your PhD in New Zealand, how your doctoral journey took you all the way there. So could you tell us a little bit more about the process of applying to the University of Auckland and what
Mhm.
motivated you to take this step?
Yes. So, I first thought about doing my PhD in New Zealand back in 2016, 10 years ago, because I was it was the end of my master program, and we were presenting in different conferences and seminars and things like that. So, 2016, there was one of the bi-yearly qualitative research symposiums that the UG hosts. Mm, I think still they host it, but so one of the international keynote speakers was so he would become my supervisor. I didn't know, of course, back then, but he was at one of the talks, and I was talking and I was presenting about my research, my master research, which was on a topic that he is one of the top academics in that area, which is identity and that kind of thing. And I remember so long story short, after the conference, I had a chance to chat with him during the social segment of the symposium, and he was just mentioning like, so what's your plan for after the masters? And I honestly, I didn't have a solid plan. I didn't, or I hadn't really thought too much about what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to continue working as an English teacher, maybe exploring other different institutions, teaching at a different institution, maybe teaching at a university, maybe becoming a teacher trainer. And I kind of thought about a PhD, but not really. So that was it. Maybe publishing, I thought. But then he mentioned that the University of Auckland, the School of Cultures, Languages, and Linguistics, which is basically like the version of División de Ciencias Sociales y Humanidades. So the School of Culture, Languages, and Linguistics had a highly reputable applied linguistics program. And then he said, you could apply and study. And at first I thought, oh yeah, I could. Why not? But you never think you can do it, or not that you can, but like you never think, oh, I'm gonna go abroad and study in New Zealand. It's like a big idea and like something I didn't really think it could be possible. But I toyed with that idea for a while, and then I was also motivated by my UGE mentors, definitely. I was motivated by them and encouraged to actually take it seriously, not just brush it off, to actually go for it. So I decided to apply. It sounds easy, but it was very, very challenging, but nonetheless possible. So that's something that maybe people that listen to this podcast might be thinking, "Oh, that could never be me." No, it could. It can be you. So the whole process took almost 2 years from the time I had that idea and I met Gary, who was my supervisor, until the moment I physically touched New Zealand soil. So it took around 2 years from, going through all the paperwork and writing a research proposal, which is like a big document, and it is like a research writing thing that needs to have good structure and it needs to be well sustained and all of that. So everything took around 2 years, but it is a matter of planning and thinking ahead and considering that that's the right thing that you want to do. Um, but that was the process I went through. Um, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Annie, for your sharing your experience. Now, moving to another country, we think that for academic purposes can be very exciting, right? But we know that also this could be like emotionally challenging. So, what are some of the biggest personal and cultural challenges you experience while adapting to life abroad?
Ah, okay. I yes, I think mainly the fact that I never lived abroad before. That was a big thing. I never really, so I'm not someone who travels a lot or someone who used to travel and visit different countries. So I actually had never been outside of Mexico, right? Um, so I never traveled, let alone, like going all the way to New Zealand. Most people choose, study abroad destinations like US and Canada, Europe. But New Zealand sometimes is not even included in the maps. So it was a big thing. And now, looking back, I'm like, wow, how did I, do that? Because I agree with what you said, Brisa. It is emotionally challenging, and it is a shock culturally as well. So I will be honest, the emotional toll that it took has been some of the hardest things that I have ever had to endure. Now I talk about it, I talk about the process like this with you, and don't get me wrong, I'm very happy and I would do it 100 times. I would do it again, but it is something that is something that's quite hard, and it continues to be hard even though I have, graduated and all of that. But it's one of the hardest things that I've had to go through. Also considering the ocean that you put between your home country and your study destination. Mm, I think I think that if I had chosen the US, for example, emotionally and maybe mentally, I could be thinking, well, if anything happens, I can just take a plane and it's not too hard to go from the US or even Canada to Mexico and go back home if I decide that it's not for me or that it's, becoming too hard. But, New Zealand is so far away that it's not the easiest thing to do, and it's also so expensive to, just you can't really just buy a ticket and go unless you're super rich, which I'm not. So I think it's a thing that um you have to sit there and process, because it's like, right, game on. You can't just go back. You have to actually go through it. Um, so I had to sort out stuff like accommodation, transport, employment, tax, banking, procedures, and all of that. But also, you're an immigrant, right? Like, yes, you're a student, you're an international student, but for immigration New Zealand, you're an immigrant, and that's not a bad thing. It's not. I'm not saying it's a negative thing, but it is a thing that comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties and a lot of um, issues that sometimes you don't think about, but you have to face and you have to solve them on your own because you're in a country so far away that you can't just call your family, right? So that was so super hard. Um, and also I had to build my support network from scratch, right? It's a new country, so you have to build your network, like I was mentioning earlier, when I was talking about my PhD colleagues. You have to make connections to get to know other immigrants, other people that are also internationals. Sometimes not just students, but people that come to this country with a different visa situation. And you learn from their experiences as well, and you learn that being a student comes with certain privileges, but also with certain limitations, as well as coming as a worker, etc. So I think that was emotionally draining. Um, but at the same time, it kind of like also gave me so much perspective, and helped me see my position as what it is, which is very privileged. It's a very privileged position to be able to leave your country and study in a country that's so far away. I also had to build, as I said, relationships with other PhD students, find a job, get to know the culture. It's so different as well. It's not just, oh, I'll apply for a job and that's it. It's very different. The processes are different. Even CVs are different. And so I had to go through all of that. And so yeah, culturally, it's a culture shock that's so big. It's hard to process as you're going through it. But it is a thing that once you retrospectively think about all of the experiences that you had or the stories that you have, you're like, oh, so I actually was going through some hard times. Um, but it's a big obstacle, the cultural shock. but it is temporary because you get to know people and then you get to know the culture and you get to um, value the culture and you get to learn so much. Um, People that I have met have been wonderful. Um, it is definitely nonetheless a different culture. So um, it's going to be different, but I did learn so much and I think I grew a lot. I did go, without going into a lot of detail, but I did go through some dark periods, right? When you're like, what am I doing here? Oh no, I should quit and just go back home and all of that. But I came out all right, mostly on the other side. So that's, good news for other people that might want to go through the same thing. But I think during my first 2 years of my doctoral studies, I think my doctoral studies were competing with social aspects, with health and emotional concerns, because I didn't just come here to study. I had to establish my life again from scratch. So it's like, yes, my studies are top priority and always have been top priority, but I also had to make sure I was healthy. I also had to make sure I wasn't really crumbling, right? And I had to make sure I had a place to rent and a job and all of that. So the first 2 years were very hard because I was trying to manage my life on the one hand, and on the other hand, I was trying to make my PhD, progress and continue and keep reading, keep writing, keep working with my supervisor and all of that. But I also had these other things going on at the same time on the side. But I do think that at some point my health took priority because I was like, well, I need to do something. This isn't gonna be sustainable. Um, so I do sometimes had to press pause on my doctoral studies. Not really like not studying. I never truly stopped doing at least something, but it did go a bit slower just because I had to prioritize, not dying. And yeah, so I would say if I could do it again, I think I would prioritize my well-being as much as possible, so that I can then do a good job completing my PhD. Uh, so I hope it wasn't too much of a negative. As it was not a negative experience, actually. It's really good. And I think I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot, but it is something that you have to endure and that um, it is not easy. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Annie. I understand your point, and I think that all of these emotional experience make you stronger. And moving on and connecting also this with your doctoral thesis, because we know that you explore identity construction and the process of becoming a teacher education. I have two questions for you. And first of all, I would like to know, did you start with the methodology chapter in your postdoctoral, sorry, in your doctoral thesis?
Mm. I can't remember. No, no, I do remember. I had a notion of, well, first of all, thank you for your question, Marlene. I think I had a notion of my methodology that I wanted to do. In terms of the methodology chapter as the thing to start with, honestly, I started with a number of chapters, working with a number of chapters simultaneously. But I do think methodology chapter took priority just because not only I knew I wanted to study identity as a core concept, but I also knew I wanted to do it through narrative inquiry. So that was very clear for me from the beginning. I really wanted to explore the potential of stories and, people's stories, but also studying the story through a narrative approach or from a narrative approach. So I'm not sure if that's a kind of advantage that I had, that I knew that I wanted to do it with that methodology. I didn't have the whole methodological framework established. I built it as I went through my studies. But the basics and the notions I had helped me a lot in and designing that study design, which um, it encompassed a number of different techniques to collect data, um, such as group interviews and individual interviews. We'll call them narrative interviews. And then I didn't really do narrative frameworks. I mean, narrative. I forgot the name of that technique, but when you start out with a sentence and then the person has to complete narrative frame, is it narrative frame? I think so. Yeah. So I didn't really do narrative frames, but I went with narrative compositions from my participants. So I built it as I had conversations with my supervisor and with his advice and guidance. Um, so I did write a big portion of my what would become my methodology chapter right at the beginning of my PhD. Mm, and it evolved and it ended up being different from what I initially wrote, but it started there. So I started with actually with the literature review. That was my main focus in my first year, because the first year, at least in this university, it is called a provisional year. So you're not really a candidate yet. So the first year, you're a provisional candidate. And after the first year, you have to go through a review for confirmation. So it's a big thing. So you have examiners and you have your supervisor there, and you can invite people, and you pitch your research to an audience, and they decide if it is it's a good idea to continue or if you need to work on certain things. So um for that provisional year, I focused a lot on my literature review to give it some context and to give the examiners um, a good um, picture of my research and what I wanted to do. So I did write quite a big portion of my lit review at the beginning, but simultaneously I was working on my methodology, because of course you want to present the idea to the audience and you want to say, this is what I want to do and this is how I want to do it. And that's when you get the feedback and you say, and then people say things like, oh, how are you going to do this if X, Y, and Z? And then you refine and then you work on those things. But yeah, back to the identity question. Uh, so I did explore identity construction, and the question was how I decided, right, to go on this direction. So my BA, my BA thesis, my master thesis, and my doctoral thesis all talk about identity. So I guess I have an obsession with identity construction or some sort of special interest there. But I do feel like it's a fascinating concept and an idea and a thing that we all go through. It's not exclusive to the area of language learning and language teaching. It is something that goes beyond that. So I think I wanted to study something that I could relate to. And, and so, of course, identity construction is something that I have dealt with personally as a professional and as an MA student, a PhD student, and as an English teacher. And also, it's something that I see or I saw in my participants, and I wanted to explore a bit more because I wanted to understand the process. So I've always been interested in identity. Mm, and I always like to draw parallels between other people's experiences and my own and say, I'm not the only one going through this. There is, um, there are some things that I can do to address certain issues or to cope with certain difficulties, etc. And what the literature says as well, right? So the origin story is that I had the privilege to teach at the BA TESOL and the University of Guanajuato after I had graduated with my master's degree. And it was such a great experience. It was amazing, but at the same time, I also felt at certain times I felt like I wasn't cut out to do the job just yet back then. I, I did the thing that we all do, that is doubt yourself, even though I had just completed my master's. I was thinking, am I the right person to do this? I don't know. I had all these self-doubts and negative self talk, but then at the same time I knew I enjoyed it. So I was just very curious about other people's stories and hearing how other teacher educators had gone through that process and that transition from teaching the language as a subject or as teaching English versus teaching teachers. So it was a very different experience for me to be right there in front of a group of experienced teachers, and me, yes, another experienced teacher, and having finished my master's, but I still thought, am I the right person to be telling them about theories? Am I the right person to be giving them assignments, etc.? So at the same time, I was still teaching English. So I think I had these two very contrasting, or what it felt like a crash between my identities as an experienced English teacher. At the time, I had a lot of experience already, and I was very comfortable teaching English, which was not a thing that happened from the beginning. I had to build that confidence, etc. And so I had this identity as an experienced and confident English teacher, and then I also had this other emerging identity as an unexperienced novice emerging teacher of teachers or teacher educator. So I was, it was a tension between these two identities. So yeah, it was a period of transformation and learning as an English teacher, but also as a new teacher educator. And my identity was at the center of it, right? So that's why identity has always been something that has captivated me. And then, as you know, I had the opportunity to study my PhD. So it was very clear for me that my research topic would be identity construction, and that's what I did. So I studied other beginner teacher educators, and I explored their identities and their um, transition stories and all of that, all of that kind of thing that happens when you start a new exciting chapter in your teaching career. Um, but yeah, that's how I became interested in identity construction. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your answer, Dr. Annie. We can see that you were going through a lot of things while doing your process, and it is important to mention that this process also happened during the pandemic, which affected many researchers around the world. How did COVID-19 impact your data collection process and your experience as a doctoral student?
Mm. Yes, it was it's something that sometimes I even block. Like I have blocked that
Yes.
period in my mind, but then I go back to it and it was so difficult. It impacted my studies so much, and I think it still does in some way, kind of like the lingering effects of COVID as a pandemic. So, as I mentioned earlier, the PhD journey can be very isolating, very lonely journey. And then on top of that, having COVID, it's something
Yes.
that made it even harder. So it was quite challenging again. And also um, I was used to because when I moved and I started my PhD, it was October 2019. And I remember that I had just started to hear about this new virus that kills people and things like that. And you hear about that in the news and you never think that's gonna actually happen. And you think, well, it's never gonna reach us, right? And so it changed everything, honestly. Data collection processes had to be moved to online settings via Zoom, like we're doing right now, which was a good thing. Retrospectively, it did mean that so many of us had to actually keep up with technology and learn these new ways of doing what we do, but it was very challenging. So all my data collection had to move to Zoom and email. Um, and that's not what I wrote in my research proposal. So I had to change it. So I had to rewrite a good portion of it. And then the country moved into a strict lockdown. Was very strict, and that lockdown started in March 2020, and so I started my PhD at the beginning of November 2019. So that was roughly 4 months of normal PhD experience. And I had met some colleagues that had been doing their PhD for a number of years and were close to graduating, but I only had 4 months of that normal PhD experience. Um, and then I remember that we all had to be under lockdown, couldn't leave our houses. And as I mentioned earlier, the challenges were not just the study or the academic aspects of conducting a PhD, but also other things like rent and finding new friends and establishing connections. So something that happened was that in lockdown, we had been doing, what they call flatting, or like sharing a house with flatmates, roommates. And so it was quite hard because my partner also did his PhD and all of that and has basically the same experience as me, um, having graduated from Universidad de Guanajuato and all of that. So we were in that household, it was 6 people in total. Two of them, me and my partner, were doing our PhD, and four of them were professional workers. So they had no idea about the challenges that we had as, postgraduate students, and the fact that we needed peace and quiet to focus. And it was a very challenging thing, and we couldn't really move because of the lockdown, right? So it wasn't like, oh, just move to a different rental. It wasn't that easy because it was forbidden to move, etc. So it did impact me in that way. So I think it as a way of as a ripple effect, it did impact my ability to actually sit down and conduct my study. Because before moving into lockdown, we all had study stations at the faculty and we could sit down and have our space and do all of that. But moving into lockdown, not everyone had that space in their houses. So it was quite challenging. But then things started to slowly move back to normal, not really normal, but like to a bit more doable. So we were able to go back into the office and have a proper space to study. But it did mean that I had to sort out the technology and have all of the Zoom, because back then was still new for many of us, because Zoom has been around for like I think like 20 years or something, but like for so many of us it was a new technology that we need to learn. And so I did my data collection via Zoom and I recorded it and then I transcribed. So Zoom gives you an automatic transcription. And then that was really good because I could just go back to my recordings and just fix all the things that weren't captured properly. So that was a positive of moving into lockdown. But other than that, everything else was very difficult. After moving back to the office, we were not really given a space to be all the PhD together in a big room, which was originally um how we were doing our PhD. It was a big room with all the PhDs and everyone had their station, their study station. But now when we came back, the faculty decided to split all of the so they split us into smaller offices. And that was really hard for all of us because we didn't have the connection anymore, or it wasn't as easy to, as simple as in the morning, say hi to your friend and how's it going? How's your data collection going? How did your supervisor meeting go? Things like that. We didn't have that anymore because we had smaller rooms with like just three people or two or three people in there, and sometimes there were new PhD students, and it was quite hard and quite challenging in that sense as well. And just finally, just for this question, I was also teaching at the time because I had a job as a graduate teacher assistant at the beginning of 2020, and it was in person, originally going to be in person, and I was teaching academic English 101 to international undergraduate students. And I was able to teach one single class in person. And then from
Mm.
there, everything moved to Zoom. So it was hard, so hard. And students, as you know, I'm very sure you went through it or you're still going through it if you're teaching online, but it can be quite challenging to teach online and to talk to the black box, right, in front of your computer. It is, you don't know, you don't have that sense of, you can't really see the other person sometimes, etc. So I had to adjust and to teach online in that rental that I talked to you about, which was very challenging, but we made it work. Yeah, so I modified my methodology to say that I was going to collect my data digitally. Originally, I wanted to go to Mexico and collect my data in person and interview my participants in person and do all of that. That was my dream methodology, but I had to adjust it. And like you said, Carla, so many researchers had to change sometimes completely their research project. Maybe, some of them didn't find it feasible anymore to do it online. Luckily, I had the option to do it on Zoom. Yes, too much text, sorry.
Don't worry. Thank you so much.
And Annie, we think that when sometimes people talk about like the academic achievements behind the PhD, like, okay, you know what? I go
Mhm.
abroad and I went abroad and now I have a PhD in this area, for example. But
Mhm.
not all the people talk about the emotional side of the process.
Mhm.
How did your doctorate affect you emotionally and psychologically?
Well, I am now crazy. No, I'm joking. I am, I have, no, yes, greatly. It affected me greatly. I think it still affects me. I graduated last year, but yes, you're right, Brisa. I agree with you. So many times we don't talk about that side because we want to appear maybe, stoic and strong and, you know, or, you have to accept it because that just comes with the journey. Um, And yes, it does, but it doesn't mean that it is not affecting you sometimes. So, um, the way it affected me was, as I mentioned earlier, and I don't, not to repeat myself so much, but the fact that it's isolating, and with Carla's question about COVID, it was just another layer, and then another layer, and another layer of difficulties. So again, I was very used to the MA program being structured uh, by semester, right? So we had clear objectives and milestones to achieve, and our classes and assignments and coursework with our classmates in the MA. And sometimes between the two, active generate like groups, like semester one and semester three or something like that. So I don't remember if that's how it is, but it's you have that aspect of you have a thing that you can bond over with your classmates. You're like, all right, we're both trying to finish this assignment. Let's get together and talk about it, and that can help with the emotional aspect. In my case, I think my PhD colleagues definitely understood, that it is challenging, but we all had completely different research topics. We all had different journeys, and we all had different difficulties. So it was a bit harder to find that connection with my colleagues. And even though it was incredibly demanding, thinking about the MA, the Master in Applied Linguistics from UG, it was demanding, but I think the program design gave me structure, and it is hard, but it meant that I knew what to expect every semester. I knew that I had four papers, and I knew that I had X amount of reading to do, or etc. So it was in a way a bit, it gave me a sense of certainty. Whereas the PhD, at least in New Zealand, UK, Australia, I'm very sure it can be different in the States, for example, in other countries. But at least the PhD's journey in New Zealand, it is self-guided. It is a thing that you need to be super proactive. You need to be the person to give the first step with your supervisor and establish a relationship and agreements with your supervisor that works for both people. And we also have milestones. So there is a division here at the University of Auckland that it's called the School of Graduate Studies, and they determine the milestones for PhD students. And so they're kind of like mm, um, they determine what you have to do. And so sometimes depending um on your needs, they will tell you, oh, right, so you need to also do a paper alongside your PhD, for example. In my case, I didn't have to do that. I think it's because the master program was very complete and very high quality, that I didn't have to do it. But at times it was hard because I didn't have that structure. And I do think that I could have appreciated a more structured program, a bit more of like more initiatives from the faculty to give students a space and maybe more activities. And they have those things, and there are support services around, etc. But it is a bit of a thing that the student has to reach out, and the student has to know to ask for those things. And as an international student from Mexico, uh, you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes I wasn't sure who to ask, and if this was a thing that my supervisor had to help me with, or if I had to go to School of Graduate Studies to get the support, etc. So emotionally, I think I had I don't recommend it, but I went through all of the things on my own because I didn't feel like other colleagues could understand certain aspects. Also the cultural aspect of, yes, having colleagues that are also doing PhDs and are also international students, but their culture is, I don't know, from all over the world. So it is a bit different. Sometimes the values of a culture are different from the values of Latin America. And then I couldn't really find, sometimes, in other times, yes, but like couldn't find the same, like a common ground with all of my colleagues. So much of the emotional burden, I went through it on my own because I just didn't know how to do it, right? And there are counseling services. And I remember one time I was like, "Oh, I miss my family. Oh no." And then I was like, I need to book an appointment. And I booked the appointment with the counselor. And she's a lovely woman, very professional. But basically she told me, "Oh, have you considered calling your family more often?" And that was her solution. So I was like, "Oh no, I never thought about that." Right? So to me, it was like, right. So in paper, this is like, yeah, we have all this support. You're not alone. Reach out. And then you reach out, and the solution is, oh, call your mom. So I don't know. I felt like, right. To me, that was a sign like I have to deal with it on my own and find my own support and all of that. I did end up calling my family more often, but it was you have to find ways. You have to be creative. You have to reach out to people. You have to kind of like get over the fear of reaching out and seem weak. Sometimes we don't want to be a burden, but I think having friends and having a support system and actually reaching out and admitting that you need support, sometimes it's just like, let's go for a walk together, and that can help you. Um, but not knowing that you can do that can be really difficult because you're kind of like navigating the whole journey basically, in blind mode. Like you're trying to find your way, but you can't see things like that. So I did have, burnout after the whole experience. I burned myself out. And it's not a good thing, and it's not something to be proud of. It doesn't show, oh, you work so hard. It's not a good thing. You're not doing yourself a favor. If you burn yourself out, you're not gonna be able to function properly. So after graduating, um I was I was doing all of my work. Oh, by the way, I was also working full time. So it is very hard. It's like hard mode on. So it was really hard because I was working at the same time full time because you have to, again, back to the challenges at the beginning of being an immigrant, you cannot not work. So I had to work. So otherwise how can I pay the bills and rent and all that? So I remember like just having to compartmentalize and just focus on one thing at a time. But it is so if I could say something just to wrap up this question, I think I feel like I've said a lot and nothing at the same time, but I feel like reaching out and trying to be brave in that sense, trying to reach out to people and try out things, like my story about reaching out to the counselor, the health counselor, and realizing it's not gonna work for me. That's a thing that at least I knew what things worked and what things didn't work. So I knew that reaching out to friends back home, online, and also new friends that I had met here meant that I was able to um come out the other way. Um Almost in one piece. Yes. Yeah, so I think that was the main thing for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Annie, for sharing with us all of these experiences. I think that you already mentioned it that are very challenging and it's something that and at the end of the day, if you are so far away from your home, it's gonna be like something that you need to deal. individually, right? So we can understand in the MAA program, we also have this type of tensions regarding to the emotionally and psychologically feelings
Mm-hmm.
regarding to do this type of studies. And now that you have complete your doctorate and work supporting researcher and postgraduate
Mm-hmm.
students at the University of Auckland, how
Mm-hmm.
do you see your relationship with research and academia today?
Yes, thank you for your question. As I mentioned at the end of the last question, I was feeling a bit or a lot of burnout, and I was not really enjoying as much, the last part because it was just so much at the same time. And so, as you mentioned, Marlene, currently I'm working at the at the library. So my job title is Research Services Advisor. So honestly, throughout my bachelor, master, and a little bit of, and the PhD, I never considered that I could do or I could explore other career pathways aside from teaching or research and that kind of thing. Currently working as a research services advisor, I support other doctoral students and academics at the University of Auckland. And I think that's something that opened my eyes to other possibilities for not just applied linguists, it, anyone with a doctoral degree or that has gone through a doctoral journey. There are other pathways because I always thought, right, if I'm not teaching or if I'm not doing research, then why did I even bother, doing a PhD? But then finding this opportunity was really good because it meant that I could effectively put into practice all of the things that I learned throughout my doctoral journey because I was supporting other doctoral students and academics, early career and mid-career and even late career researchers at the university. So my department is embedded within the library. So I guess my old job title would be subject librarian. So in the end, I did end up working at a library. So, and I've been learning so much with this role. I've been doing this role for 3 years, 3 years, I think. Um, and again, I didn't consider this to be a career path for me until I actually took the job. So we do lots of things in this role. We support research activities. We don't conduct research for on behalf of researchers, but we support researchers and PhD students with things like literature reviews, database searching, optimization of the research strategy, optimization also of the research re of the search strategy to find literature, reference, administration and management and things like that. So I've learned so much about publishing, for example, as well, and what it involves, and publishing at top journals and what it means. I've learned so much also about funding and the process of applying for grants and funding as researchers, and then I also, it made me realize that academia, um, it is highly competitive, and it's not because you as an academic want to necessarily compete with other academics, but it's because there's limited research funds and limited um, resources, for example, and everyone has to apply for those grants and things, and in a way you're fighting for the grant. And so yeah, so I think it's something that I definitely want to go back at some point to academia. Um, So my relationship with academia today is that we're taking a break. It is difficult. But it is, my first love, basically, research. And, I do love it so much. But in my job at the moment, it means that I don't have to, or I don't need to do research, but I do things associated with research that I learned throughout my years in research. So I have been able to effectively apply that learning and knowledge to support other researchers and help them develop their strategies to approach research and to, again, find information in the different databases. Or another example of the things we do that I think my degree has been highly relevant is that we in the team we design self-access content for researchers and for doctoral students. So all of my pedagogical background and uh, the linguistic aspects of instructions, for example, or how to use language in a way that it is digestible for academics, etc. I support the development of resources and I work on polishing the language and working on, maybe weeding out all of the jargon if it's not necessary and things like that. And that's another learning opportunity for me. I've been learning about learning platforms and learning management systems and digital, learning content, which is not something that I necessarily did a lot during my BA, MA, and PhD, but I'm learning right now. And, you know, all of the self-access principles that I learned in my bachelor and my master's are handy now, are becoming handy to me. And then I can also support my team, my colleagues here at the library. And I've also been conducting professional development sessions for them, not just me, with other colleagues as well. And depending on our areas of strength, we support our colleagues to upskill and to develop those abilities that maybe they don't have because they don't have an educational background. They may have a librarianship background, and then together we join forces and then we try and make the resources um, like make them optimal for user experience and etc. So I think that I'm enjoying quite a lot this new career pathway that I'm exploring that I never knew it was possible. So for people listening, you know, this is maybe another area that can be a possibility for applied linguists, right? Working on developing content for an institution that can be appropriate for the, you know, level of knowledge of the different audiences or stakeholders, in this case, doctoral students and researchers. So I've been enjoying this experience so much. I hopefully one day mm, find myself in academia again. Who knows? Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dr. Annie. It was very insightful of you. And as you mentioned, many students listening to this episode may dream about studying abroad or pursuing a PhD someday. What
Mhm,
advice would you give to those who feel afraid, insecure, or even unsure about taking that path?
mhm. Thank you for that question. I think it's a very important question because I think that if I didn't have all of the support and encouragement from my master degree mentors and colleagues and family, maybe I wouldn't have decided to take the next step. But I think so what I would say to them that feel maybe unsure or afraid of taking the next step is that if you're gonna do it, try and build a community and try and build that support system. Um, and try and learn as much as possible and be informed about your options and the things that you can do in your study abroad destination, and that maybe the research line, or like the research sorry, the subject areas of your institution that you want to study at, that make sure they align with what you want to do. um, the way I did it is that had a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to do in terms of my research topic and methodology, so that that meant that my supervisor, um, that I knew a good supervisor for me. Um, Also, I would say that being afraid is something that you can work on. You can be afraid of certain things, but then, you get over them. Think about the things you thought about before starting your master degree. So maybe before starting your master degree, you were also doubting yourself and thinking, maybe it's too much for me. Maybe I can't do it. Maybe it's gonna be too hard. But hey, you're doing it, right? So the same logic can be applied to your doctoral degree. And it is possible to do it. It is hard, yes, it is hard, but many other things are hard. And so to help you with that, again, I think it's reading as much as possible about, like, getting informed, doing your research about that institution, how the support that is available to you as an international student, the immigration processes, is it is there a community of other maybe Latin American people there, or things like that, and that can help you with your feeling of or feeling afraid or feeling insecure, because um the more you learn and the more you are informed, the more resources you have to deal with that. So that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you, Annie, for sharing. And finally, if you could go back and talk to the Annie who was just beginning her bachelor's degree at the University of Guanajuato, what would you tell her?
Oh my gosh, The Bachelor. I would say, mm, just make the most of every weekend at the Escuela de Idiomas. Enjoy Guanajuato. Spend more time with your colleagues, with your friends. Honestly, that's what I remember the most. Yes, the literature, yes, all the knowledge that I gained, and all of that, but I think about my friends, honestly. I think about all those study sessions, like, let's do a reading session for Irasema and things like that. So that's what I remember, and that's what I value so much. So I would say enjoy as much as possible every weekend. It's really, like, really make the most out of it. Um, yeah, enjoy Guanajuato, enjoy the school, enjoy the people, make connections, and read. Read. That's what I would say. Yes.
Dr. Annie, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today, your reflections and advice. It has truly been an inspiring conversation for us.
Thank you.
And we are very grateful for your time and for allowing us to learn more about the academic and human side of your journey.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for the opportunity, and I enjoyed this conversation a lot. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Dr. Annie, for being here. We really appreciate it. We know that you have your work and you have things to do, so it means a lot to us. And thank you to everyone listening to LinguaVis. We hope this episode inspires you to continue learning, researching, and believing in your own journey. Don't forget to follow us in our social media to stay updated on future episodes, academic discussions, and special guests. Thank you for being part of our community. Until the next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.